Thank you, everyone, for joining this morning for this presentation of the research we did on millennial professionals. Over the last 5 years or more, we've seen an increased focus on this segment of the population that we call millennials. Pretty much that's a buzzword. Everyone's paying attention. Everyone wants to know about them. Everyone wants to study them. And I'm sure you understand why, but just to kind of bring that out there, millennials are now the largest generation in the U.S. So, and I should back up here, there is no official definition of millennial in terms of like what year to what year, but we here use the Pew definition, and Pew has done a lot of work, the Pew Research Center, with this group. So we're kind of using their version of millennials, their definition of millennials. But according to Pew, there's now 75 million millennials in the U.S. It's 23% of the U.S. population. They are estimated to be about a third of the workforce right now, and projected to be 40 to 50% or more of the workforce by 2030. So obviously they're a huge segment of the population. They're just becoming a bigger and bigger part of the workforce. Most of the research, that we've seen focuses on the millennial consumer, as a target customer. So we wanted to kind of spend some time focusing on the millennial professional. What does the millennial in the workplace look like? First, before I kind of jump into what we did, I have a clip here from some research we did about a year ago. Our client was kind enough to let us use the clip here with an older professional's perspective on millennials. And this echoes a lot of what we hear. I'm going to play this clip for you.
To be honest with you, some are kind of, I know this sounds kind of mean, but they're kind of lazy.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. They just want to be given the money. They don't really want to work for it. They would rather just sit there and talk on their cell phones or text the whole time they're supposed to be working.
So, as you hear there, and we hear in a lot of the research we do, older professionals often have kind of a clear, very negative view of millennials. A lot of sort of ideas and preconceived notions about what millennials are like without necessarily understanding some of the differences for the millennial professionals. So that assumption that, they're on their phone texting and they're not working, they may be on their phone, but we'll see as we kind of go through, what we're doing, that doesn't mean that they're not working. And so I think, it's important to understand those differences and to know how millennials are contributing in the workplace and not kind of just dismiss them as, a useless segment of the workforce, especially when they're such a big part of it and just becoming a bigger part of it. So what we did a qualitative study. So all of this research we're going to talk about today is qualitative. It's not quantitative. It's a smaller number. It's directional only. We, as I mentioned, used the Pew definition of millennials, which when we collected this information at the end of 2016 was between the ages of 19 and 35. And because we're dealing here with millennial professionals, they tend to be on the older side of that range, which we call leading versus trailing millennials, just by nature of having, kind of been in a career and been in business. We completed 24 one-hour telephone in-depth interviews, and how that was divided was 8 small business owners across a variety of industries, and then 16 millennial financial professionals. And I just want to preface this by, one of our biggest verticals here at Zeldis Research is the financial services and insurance industry, so that is part of what this research, why this research has a focus on financial professionals. But we found that a lot of the findings here, there was so much consistency both with the small business owners and the financial professionals, and based on work we do in other industries, that a lot of the findings here, I think, are applicable to millennials in a variety of industries. We did a mix of webcam and phone-only interviews, so you'll see a mixture of audio clips and video clips throughout. So I mentioned who we spoke to. This is just to give you kind of an overview of what those populations look like in more detail. So you can see, as I mentioned, there's a range in terms of the ages, but they tend to be on that leading millennial side with an average age 31, 32, depending on the group. Although we had folks as young as 25 in the mix. You can see kind of the variety within each of these groups. We tried to get a variety of industries for the small business owners, roles and responsibilities, types of financial advisors. We had a very good mix of gender across the board. We had a fairly even split between men and women, and we had a good representation of geography nationwide. So kind of the core of what we were looking for in our research is how are millennial professionals perhaps different from their older counterparts. And I want to mention here that Zeldis does a large number of studies. We do both qualitative and quantitative, but we talk to a lot of professionals in these industries and other industries across, obviously, generations. A lot of those folks we talk to tend to be Gen Xers and baby boomers, just by nature of who's in the business. So when we talk about the findings here of how millennial professionals are unique or different, our findings are based on both self-report, so how millennials see themselves as different or are told that they're different, as well as our experience talking to professionals across the generations and kind of comparing what we've seen in other research we've done with these conversations that we have with millennials specifically. So there were many differences, but we kind of bucketed them into four main categories that we felt were sort of overwhelmingly similar across the millennials that we spoke to. The first is motivation, so kind of what gets them out of bed in the morning. The second is adaptability and flexibility. Technology, which is kind of the one that everybody expects and definitely rose to the surface. And then finally, education and the importance of education. So these four things, they were the strongest sort of differentiators for the millennial populations we spoke to. And we're going to go into each one in more depth and hear from some millennials about these things. So when it comes to motivations and what is driving the millennial professional in their career, in their job, what we heard a lot of is that millennials are really focused on the ability to make a difference and help people. And that is not to say that all professionals don't want to help people and do a good job and make a difference in the world. But for millennials, it's a driving force, it's a passion. And it's about making the world a better place and not just doing my job well and helping folks day to day, but overall really making it my mark on the world and leaving the world a better place. And so we hear that pretty clearly. You're going to hear a couple clips, but just some examples. We had a small business owner who is an event planner, and she targets only nonprofits because she really wants to help them with their event planning and do so effectively and cost effectively. We had a financial advisor who specializes in socially conscious investments. So that's her core, not that she doesn't do other things, but that's her specialty, and she wants to find investments that are socially conscious that also can help her clients. Another motivator for millennials is that they are looking for a stable career that helps them be happy and satisfied, that makes them want to go to work every day, and that they're really enjoying the day-to-day of what they're doing. For them, while financial success is not unimportant and they want to be able to support their families and live a good life, it's secondary. They want to feel satisfied, feel fulfilled in what they do first. And then a lot of them feel like the financial success is just a natural consequence of doing what you love and being passionate about what you do. And that's different from what we hear with older professionals that we speak with. Flexibility, and this is going to come up in kind of the next difference we talk about, but in terms of their work environment, they want flexibility, they want a reasonable work-life balance, and they want a work environment that isn't corporate and formal, but is sort of a warm and casual feel. They don't they want to feel like they're working with their friends, that they're having a good time, that it feels good to be at work. They don't want a lot of rules and restrictions and regulations if they're not necessary. Interestingly, with some of the small business owners we spoke with, they see providing a flexible, casual, warm environment for their employees as the most important thing, and often they see that as a trade-off for compensation and benefits. So when we asked a lot of the small business owners we spoke with, do you offer your employees medical and benefits? They said, well, no, but they're really happy because it's a really fun, casual work environment, which is interesting because that's a priority for them, but may not be a priority for perhaps all of their employees, especially those who might be older. Finally, one of the other motivations is variety. And we're going to, again, see this when we talk about education, but millennials want variety. They want challenge. They want something new. They want to constantly kind of be evolving and changing, whether that means, doing something different every day. For some of the small business owners, it means, starting a business, making it successful, and then starting a new business because I want to do something different. But they like change. They like variety, which, again, is something we don't hear. In fact, we hear the opposite from some older professionals where they don't like a lot of change. They're not comfortable with change. Millennials are comfortable with change and actually thrive on it. So let's hear a little bit from some of the folks that we spoke to. And you can see these little symbols next to each person. If it's a little blue umbrella, it means it was an insurance agent. If it's a little kind of money, green money, then it's the advisors, and then it's a little person at a desk, and then that's the small business owner. I'm going to play this first one here.
Success is, to me, it's being able to do what you want to do, what you love to do, and make an impact in society and in your community and make the world a better place, I guess. I don't look at success as kind of a dollar figure or anything like that. To me, it's more, having the lifestyle you want, but also being able to have the ability to make an impact and do good things in the world and in the community and for our employees and everything that goes into that.
It's a really, kind of prototypical example of what we heard. Here's just a quote here. Some of them, the audio or the video wasn't perfect, so we used a quote. This was an advisor who talked about her specialty, as I mentioned, working with socially conscious investors. She had a hedge fund in school that was funded by the school and local investors where they helped, in this case, they helped Native American reservation. And they started that. The goal was to generate money with a socially conscious focus to help other people, and that has always been a focus and desire. So that was something that drove her into the industry and drove what she's doing in her industry. And here is a restaurant owner from Brooklyn.
I really wanted the freedom of not having to work for someone else. I never really, it's not like it was this like long-time goal of mine that I wanted to own my own business. It was just, I knew I wasn't happy doing what I was doing before. I know there wasn't the freedom, and I didn't see any long-term potential there. So when presented with the chance to kind of work for myself and it was more so, I understood that this opportunity would allow me to create jobs for other people. And when I saw that, I was like, yeah, I definitely want to do something in which I can obviously, make a living and create jobs for other people, as well as be like a positive force in the community, especially in Brooklyn, because there's a lot of restaurants in Brooklyn, but there's not any, as far as I know, that's doing exactly what we're trying to do, which is we're more than just, food. We're also focused on building the community and doing all these community service events and allowing the restaurant to be a force for good in our neighborhood.
So, that's a great example. In the work we do, we've talked to a lot of small business owners. We've talked to a lot of restaurant owners in various research that we've done. And that is not something you typically hear, that, you want your restaurant not only to be a good restaurant, but also really be a force for change and good in the community. So it's just a perfect example of kind of that wanting to make a difference in the world. The next, big difference that we pulled out was this adaptability. And I spoke a little bit to this in the last slide, but millennial professionals see themselves as ready and even eager for change. They really thrive on things changing and evolving. Some actually, more than one, use the term adapt or die. They see the world is changing, they see their industries is changing, and they need to change with it to be successful. And that's a good thing for them, whereas with a lot of older populations, that's a very strong negative. So it can mean different things. It can mean getting new licensing or certifications, depending on the industry, selling new products. And as I mentioned before, for several of the business owners we spoke with, their plan is to go from company to company. Once I've made this company really successful, I'm going to sell it and I'm going to start my next company and do something different. So that is something that they really look for, and what they see as kind of the worst possible thing in any career is to just be doing the same thing forever and not having that change and not having that opportunity for challenge and to kind of evolve over time. So here's an audio clip from one of our millennials.
Learning. Every day is something new, 10 years of experience, and it is still a challenge. You know, every day, today even, you know, I have 3 or 4 different challenges. You know, you get to speak about your knowledge with your coworkers and learn together to try and grasp the industry and all the changes. And because we're an agency, we've got like 4 main companies, and we have brokerages on top of that, so we service, you know, 100-some companies. So everything is continually new. Every time you get a new email, it's new product, new understanding, new laws that go into it. And it's just an ever-growing monster, and you can't master it, which is what makes it beautiful.
So you know, that's probably my favorite clip because it just speaks to that last sentence, speaks to it so well. She calls it an ever-growing monster, and you can never master it, and that's what makes it beautiful. I can tell you from talking to many Gen Xers and baby boomers that is not a sentiment that they share. That is not beautiful to them, to constantly having to be learning new things and adapting to new things. But for this millennial, it's kind of what she thrives on it. It's what makes her kind of love her career and her job. And here's one more.
Because millennials are the future, and whether or not the old guard can accept it, the ones who are coming up now like the instant gratification of social media rather than the long-term sort of thinking of putting money away every year or matching, you know, their 401k contributions by their companies. So I do think it's sort of an adapt or die sort of prospect. And I do.
So you can hear he used that term I mentioned, and he was specifically talking about, he's actually a small business owner who works in the financial industry, and we were talking about the trend of robo-advisors in the advisory industry. So these companies that don't use a financial advisor, they use, you know, algorithms and an online tool to, and most financial advisors hate this idea. It's abhorrent to them, and they think it's terrible, and it's ruining their industry, and it's a fad, and it's going to go away. And this gentleman understands that it is something that could appeal to a younger generation, and it could be successful, and it's something that the advisory industry has to understand and embrace, or they'll get left behind. So it's a very kind of different perspective. The next big difference, technology, and again, this is one that we all would expect, and we expected in our research, and you know, it was true, right? So millennial professionals are eager and willing to use new technology in all aspects of their business. So they embrace it, they value it, they find various ways to use it. Many of them mention that they are the go-to person when it comes to technology in their company. So they're the ones that their older, you know, colleagues will go to if they have a question about technology, they need to use technology. Many use social networking and digital marketing. That's just natural to them. That's just what you do. There are certain millennial professionals we spoke to whose company bans it, but other than that, it's pretty widely used and accepted, and is seen as something that is important. Interestingly, a lot of these younger folks who are using digital marketing or social networking to do business are getting pushback from older supervisors or managers or owners who are saying, that's a waste of time and the company doesn't need to do that and I don't know why you're doing that, and they're kind of pushing back against that. Many communicate with their clients and customers through text, email, or through a website, which is something that I think, speaks to that earlier quote we heard about them being on their cell phones. But what's important to note here is that while obviously millennials are comfortable communicating with their customers this way, they adapt their style to their customer. So if they're working with a customer who's not comfortable texting or even emailing, then they'll use the phone or they'll meet in person. But they take their lead from their clients and customers, and they see this as a more efficient way to do business and a way that younger clients and customers are expecting and want. Finally, when it comes to the companies that are servicing them in some way, they value technology as a key service. So they're looking to do business with companies that have great websites and servicing portals, and that they can work with using technology. To them, that's a cost of entry. They're not going to consider working with a company that doesn't have, really streamlined technology, really kind of on the forefront of technology. Let's hear from someone about this topic.
Yeah, I do. I see that some people that are older, they have a harder time with figuring out that kind of stuff. They would still rather the people come in at that point too. It's just that older generation is just not as technological driven as we are. They didn't grow up with it, so to them it's normal for them to come in and talk or have a phone call. But the younger agents now are just like, okay, yeah, we'll shoot you an email, we'll text you, we'll send you an email to have you DocuSign this or whatever. And I think that there is kind of a little bit of a gap for the older generation versus the younger generation on the technology side of things.
And this is a small business owner who's an event planner.
We use Snapchat. We use Instagram. I love Instagram. We use Twitter. We use Facebook. We're not heavy on Facebook just because we don't see any return on Facebook, and plus the engagement is really, really low just because of all the parameters Facebook has put up on business pages. So how do we use social media? We use it, we show people behind the scenes things. We show them setting up. We show how the event looks before and how it looks after. We do time-lapse videos. We do a combination of things on our social media platforms. And now that Snapchat is here in Insta Stories, that's new, a lot of people are engaging with the videos because now people are actually able to see what we do.
So you can see, I mean, her whole business model is based on digital marketing, social networking. It's not in this clip, but very interestingly, her company just got a website. So they've been in business for, I think, 5 years, and a website, they didn't need a website. The way she talked about it, it was like, that's old school. We don't need a website because we're doing all this social media, and that's where we're getting our customers, and that's where we're getting our business. So yeah, okay, I put a website up there, but I didn't do it until, much further into my company, and she doesn't see it as an important piece of her business. So the last piece I want to mention is education. Millennial professionals love learning. They value learning, and this is all tied into their desire for variety and for stuff that's new. They constantly want to be learning more about their business. They want to be learning more about their career. They want to be learning about new products and new things they can be selling and new things they can be doing. They, again, don't want to stay still and just do what they've been doing, and so education feeds that need for them. Some mention that their desire to stay educated and informed and constantly learn about the new aspects of their business helps keep them more current in their field and actually gives them an advantage that counters their lack of experience. So, while they acknowledge that their older counterparts, their colleagues, are more experienced and they have, that's an advantage for them that they've done this longer and they know the business longer. They say that their desire to want to always be up on the new thing actually can help counteract that with their customers, because they might know something that their older colleagues don't, because they're just more active in learning what's new. So, they're almost everyone we spoke to, almost all of these millennial professionals were college educated, but they're just constantly thriving on learning more. This is one of the small business owners we just heard from talking about this a little bit.
Like my generation, I feel like we're always willing to share. Like I have a group of entrepreneurs. We have, for instance, we have work parties. We all have different backgrounds. We're all in different industries, and we just talk about, we usually have a topic, and to help our business, to help our businesses and to help us brainstorm. And I feel like that is very helpful because we're constantly adding value to one another. I don't see that with the older generation of entrepreneurs. It's very hard for, because I've reached out to a lot of older entrepreneurs and they were not receptive. And I feel younger young entrepreneurs, we're just willing to help. We're eager to learn. We love to ask questions. We're extremely inquisitive, and we just want to know how to do certain things.
So that's a perfect example, and actually a lot of the small business owners we spoke with shared that sentiment that they use kind of networks of other business owners. One mentioned something called WeWork, which is a service that offers both kind of rental space in cities as well as shared services to young entrepreneurs. And that's a place that's like almost like an incubator for new businesses, and that's a place that younger business owners go to learn about their business, or they use mentors. I mean, this one mentioned trying to do that unsuccessfully, but a lot of them talk about finding a mentor that can teach them about the business and constantly, again, seeking out new information. This is a financial advisor speaking about something similar.
I think it helps that I just finished my CFP. Everything is very fresh, and so I'm finding I know all the current contributions, the future contributions, the income limitations, and so I'm able to answer complexities a whole lot quicker than most, I think.
So, that was kind of speaking to the fact that because she's constantly getting new certifications and continuing education in her industry, that she's able to kind of help her clients maybe more easily than some of her older colleagues. So kind of just looking at, for those of us out there that want to do business with these millennial professionals and want them to be our customers, what are some things to think about in terms of the motivation, and this is within your own industry, kind of recruiting millennials into your businesses as employees, focusing on a variety, flexibility, and whatever you do that might, make a difference in the world. We spoke to insurance agents, which, you think of the insurance industry, you might not think of these things as hallmarks of working in the insurance industry, but in fact, the insurance agents we spoke with absolutely felt that they get to do something different every day. They have a huge variety in what they do, that career is flexible to them, that they're helping people and they are making a difference in the world. So I think focusing, whatever your industry is, helping focus on these things can attract millennial professionals. And working with small business owners, it's important to communicate what you do, how it can make their job easier and save them time and stress, because that is something that they are dealing with every day. Adaptability, constantly sharing new opportunities, new products and services, letting folks know how you can help them as they grow and change in their business, how what you offer can help them adapt their own company or their own industry. They want more information, they want more opportunities. What can they do different moving forward? Obviously, we've talked about technology, and I mentioned that to work with these millennial professionals, you need to be offering best-in-class technology, whether that's your website, your portal, however you service them, has to be technology driven. And if that's not something that a company does, then millennials won't even consider them. Digital marketing and social networking, so helping millennial professionals with these things would offer value to them. They see that as important. They're looking for help with that. And then education. So often millennial professionals are looking for companies to help offer opportunities for them for continuing education. So interestingly, in terms of the channel for that, they are not looking for everything to be online. You might think that they are, but that's more of a learning style. So they are looking for opportunities that are both in person and online. So webinars and YouTube videos, but also in-person opportunities. And then, they talk about wanting continuing education opportunities, but that it needs to be scheduled well in advance because that's what stops them from doing it when they can't fit it into their busy schedule. So in addition to these key differences that we found with millennials, we also, just wanted to highlight a couple of the ways that we saw consistency when talking to millennial professionals with some of the older professionals we've spoken to in our research. So, where are they not really different? Where do they share the same perspective as their older counterparts? So some of the key similarities we found were family and friend connections. So in terms of a professional life, many millennials get into the business because they know someone who is in the business, whatever that business is, whether that was starting a business or entering a particular industry or field, that is something that drives them in starting whatever career they start. And we see that, again, with older professionals as well. In terms of what companies they work with, we mentioned the technology, and that was unique to millennials, but the other priorities, pricing or cost, and the relationship or service they receive, those are the same priorities for millennials as they are for Gen Xers and Boomers when it comes to a provider relationship. Whatever the provider might be, whether that's, their bank or their vendors that they work with, those are the things that are important. Small business owners are driven by cost and convenience. So they are busy and they can't be bothered to spend a ton of time researching and thinking about some of their, their focus on their business, and that everything else is driven by cost and convenience. And again, that's something that we hear consistently with older business owners as well. The importance of community involvement, and I'm differentiating this from sort of making a difference in the world and changing the world. I'm thinking more from a marketing perspective, so especially with our small business owners, but our other professionals as well that are in sales, seeing the importance of, for example, sponsoring a Little League team. That's something that's consistent with older folks, professionals, as well as millennials. They see the importance of getting out into the community and being active just from a marketing perspective. And then being relationship driven. A lot of older folks perceive millennials as not being relationship driven, as being on their cell phones, as being on social networking in a kind of superficial way. But that's absolutely not true. Millennials, that's what they value, both in terms of their providers and vendors that they work with, but also with their customers and clients. It's all about the relationship. And so that has not changed for millennials as compared to older professionals. That's kind of a summary of our findings. We did kind of, at the beginning of our research, we crowdsourced some of the content from our clients. Some of that was financial and insurance specific, so I'm not going to include that here in this more general presentation. But a couple of the questions about small business owners I did include here that some of our clients had wanted answered. So one of them is, how do these small business owners decide to start their own business? Where does that come from? And what we found with these millennial small business owners is that they're kind of in two different camps. So a few of them are just sort of describe themselves as accidental entrepreneurs. So they fell into it, into owning their own business. A couple of them, one of them was unemployed. One of them, kind of had a hobby that turned into a business. It wasn't something they planned on doing. It wasn't their initial career. It just sort of happened. But more of them, most of them, say that they had always planned to be a business owner. They want to be their own boss. As we mentioned with friends and family, several of them had parents who own their own business. We didn't really talk to folks who took over their family business, but just growing up in a household with, for example, we had one business owner who had parents who were doctors and owned their own practice. And that's not what he does, but he grew up kind of seeing folks be their own boss and run a business, and that influenced him to start his own business. And that's what we saw most often. And then what are small business owners' biggest challenges? The millennials we spoke to, really the focus is time and bandwidth, and that's part of why they're so driven by convenience and cost. Another thing that a lot of the small business owners, millennial small business owners, mentioned were the difficulty juggling doing their job, focusing on what their business does, and working on the business in terms of managing a small business. So that's something where they need a lot of help. They got into this because they loved whatever it is that they're doing, their business is doing, whether that's owning a restaurant or event planning, but they don't know how to run a business. That's the part they have to learn, and that's a struggle for them. Managing growth, and this relates to the next one, which is having a plan versus taking things day to day. A lot of the millennial small business owners are kind of flying by the seat of their pants a bit, right? So they don't have a business plan. They don't have a plan for year-to-year growth. They don't have targets. They're just kind of day-to-day trying to stay afloat and trying to get business and do the job and get to the next day. And that's something we see a little bit different from older business owners who are more, again, their businesses have been around longer. They're more entrenched, so they have had more experience in planning for growth and planning for the future, versus these folks whose businesses tend to be a little younger, kind of just taking it day by day. So those are just some of the questions we had. I'm going to just play a little clip related to that.
There's definitely a lot of advantages, but there's a lot of disadvantages. The advantages is being able to create my own destiny, to create my own salary, create my own schedule. I get to say yes or no if I want to work with someone or not. The disadvantages is it's extremely, it's hard work times 10. Like, you have to put your every ounce in it. I invested every dollar that I make, I invest it right back into the business. So that's another, challenge. Sometimes your cash flow could be really tight. My lifestyle definitely changed a lot. I had to, really figure out my finances, maxed out credit cards. I couldn't go out. I couldn't, hang out with my friends as much because I wanted to focus on the business and bringing it to the next, to the next level.
That's just kind of a little peek into how difficult it is to run a small business for anyone, but from a millennial perspective specifically. So that's kind of what I have here. I'm hoping that some of you had some questions. Brad, I don't know if you got any questions over the course of the presentation, but I'm happy to answer those. Yeah, no, and that was actually interesting to us because, and I think I touched on it a little bit, but we expected millennials to want their educational opportunities all through online channels, right? So YouTube videos or webinars or and actually, I should say, and I meant to mention this earlier, a few did mention podcasts. They love podcasts, and so they'd love to have a podcast in their specific industry or job. But that said, almost an equal number still value in-person opportunities or face-to-face or on the phone where there's live interaction. They, they attributed, and I think we attributed when we were doing our analysis, that learning style, whether you learn better kind of from a static something online versus something live, that's not necessarily a generational difference. So even with the younger generation, there's some folks who prefer an in-person education. So our kind of conclusion is that really they need to be offered educational opportunities in a variety of channels. Sure. So we have done the work that's for our clients with this population, so that we can't share, but we are definitely talking about doing a follow-up to this study where we do a quantitative survey with millennial professionals and get at some more hard numbers around some of the conclusions we drew today. So look for that hopefully later this year. That's a really interesting question. It actually sort of dovetailed really well. So millennials were pretty accurate in their self-assessment of how they differ from their older counterparts. So I would say there was 80% overlap where they were saying this is how we see that we're different, and it really overlaps with what we see in the research we do. So where they were saying they're different, we were looking at kind of what we've heard from older professionals, and it was the same. So I would say the overlap was huge. It was kind of both for most of the 4 main differences that we saw. For coming in and listening to the presentation, if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to discuss this. It was one of the most interesting research studies I've done in a long time, and I'm happy to chat about it in more detail or more specifically to whatever your organization does. And as Brad mentioned, you will get a link to the video of this that you can share, and it will also be on our website.